Great. Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Bob the Father, another session here. So, yesterday we had more of a private discussion, so we didn't put it on the internet. That's cool. It was really more kind of inside baseball, so I don't know how much it would have been affecting other people. It was more stuff about the seminary. More so personnel there and people that we know. So
Yeah.
it's all good. Great, but welcome. So any questions? The floor is open.
Well, can I start?
Of course.
Yes. You're probably all going to throw me out.
No.
No, we
No
love
one
it.
gets thrown out.
So I've just been saving up some kind of things that Father has touched on in his homily that I had further questions about.
If I
I'm
can
gonna go
remember,
back-
sure.
I'm going to go back to kind of an earlier one that I had questions about, and that was your little talk or homily on capitalism and socialism. It's a big thing. My sister's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I do have questions about that," and
Great.
I read a little bit on the Catholic Church's stance.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not a communist or a
Yeah.
socialist,
Yeah.
but I do have often wondered why the church does not like in the Diocese of St. Louis, like why all the parishioners' money didn't go to the diocese and then give back equally so that every church could be sustainable, like the apostles did.
Yeah.
It seems the right thing.
Well, okay, good. I think the heart of your question there, Lisa, is a definition of the word church.
Okay.
Right. So the word church is defined. We touched on this a little bit when we talked about ecumenism. Actually, this is kind of defined not only just by the Catholic Church, but also by ecumenical dialogue. So a church is a community of people gathered around a bishop that's guided by the Holy Spirit, directed towards the Eucharist. Now, in that context, we have what we call particular churches and domestic churches, right? So in other words, the parish is kind of a model of a particular church, right? That the pastor, in union with the bishop, is kind of the representative of the bishop in that particular parish. And so around that particular pastor, directed towards the Eucharist, are the gathering of people. So the territory or the parish is kind of the particular church, and we actually saw that the same in the early church. So like there would be certain like devastations, like we hear about Macedonia had a problem where there was an earthquake and destruction, and so there was kind of this plea to the other churches to kind of help and provide funds for that, and the church provided, right? But that wasn't like, we're going to take the funds and then redistribute them equally amongst the other dioceses to make sure everyone has enough money. It was really, look, we have a particular church established, and yeah, we can pull everything together for that particular church to kind of help for the means of it, but the money's going to be going to where the need is, right? So in other words, it's not like, well, everyone gets $50 and do with that whatever you will. It's, okay, well, you need $50 to go feed your family. Well, here you go. Well, you don't need $50 because you have enough money. Okay, well, great. Awesome. So it was kind of just, when you read about in the Acts of the Apostles, how everything was given at the Apostles for the use of the church, yeah, it was based on a need basis of where, in a charitable way, what was actually given, right? So not only would it just be against kind of that scriptural aspect, but it would also be against canon law to say, okay, the means of the parish need to stay in the territory with the people of the parish. And so we wouldn't give that to the upper authority unless there was a need to, through the principle we call subsidiarity, right? So in other words, let's say we were having some financial problems here in the
Are you
parish.
saying that there's a canon law that says we can't do that?
Canonical requirements require that funds stay with the parish,
Okay.
right? So now, this is where it gets kind of crazy. I think we talked about this in one of the other sessions, I can't remember which one, but this is where it gets kind of fuzzy because the parishes also have the responsibility to support the diocese at large, right? Now, how that's done is not specified in canon law, right? So what some dioceses have decided to do is maybe put what they call like a cathedra, which is like a tax, which is like a percentage of the amount of assets of a particular parish, and say a percentage of that you owe to the archdiocese for the means and the goods of what the archdiocese does, right? Is that legal? Well, it's not a violation of canon law, but it's not explicit either, right? In the same way that the parish was to provide for the needs of the people, it should be done charitably towards the archdiocese in some ways too, right? So if we think about like tithing, maybe a good example is like tithing, right? So tithing just means 10%. And that comes from the book of Genesis, where Abraham gave 10% of his earnings in this battle to this priest king, right? Who we don't know when he was born or when he died, but he's this priest king that is in charge of the city of peace, Jerusalem. His name was Melchizedek, right? Now, what the church teaches when it comes to tithing is that it's kind of based on your means, right? So maybe some years you could give 10%, maybe some years you give 20%, maybe some years you only give 2%, right? The church understands there's circumstances of a person that maybe they can't contribute, that 10. The 10 is just kind of a baseline, but their circumstances do matter. Right. In the same way, well, okay, if I give 10% of my budget, let's say, to the archdiocese, well, is that really fair? Because maybe we can't afford that 10%. Right? There has to be maybe a dialogue there. Right? So the funds are always meant to stay with the people that are being served by those funds, particularly the people in an area.
But the funds come from the people.
Yes.
So to me, if just kind of socio-economically, you have areas in the diocese where people earn more income, and so their churches are going to grow and be able to have all the things that every church should have. And then you're going to have other areas where people may be aging and the income is not as high, and so therefore their church lacks. That doesn't seem Christian to me.
Well, but see, that's what I'm saying. That in that respect, the pastor of a particular church could reach out to the pastor and say, we could use some money if you have any to give us. And the pastor of that particular parish might say, oh, sure, how much, we can provide this much or whatever, right?
You're talking about from another parish or from the archdiocese?
Another parish, right?
I mean, they do
that
with St. Vincent de Paul.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, we see that in Vince Paul, but I think what you're talking about more is like the
I'm
funds
talking
of the
like,
parish.
right, because I think like maybe presentation got, like, I think we made them in St. Joseph's and Cottleville gave us some money.
Yeah, right.
And yeah, I see that, but I would think that would be harder for a pastor to. That seems kind of grappling. Like, please, can you give us something? Where it seems more.
Well, I think it's done. I mean, I think that's
equally fair if it all went to one place and you went back out.
Yeah, I mean,
as not like equally, like but as the need requires. If this parish is
so the way the church envisions that kind of happening is based on the territory, right?
Okay.
So in other words, it's not just the parish. It's less, so in this case, the subsuming of presentation expanded that territory, right? So the thought would be that as that territory expands, more people are bringing more money in, and then more is being distributed out to those people, the people that need it within that territory. Right?
I would be curious if that's a fact or not.
Well, I mean, what do you? I mean, I guess what particularly is there?
I'm curious is that like, and I'm just using presentation as an example because that's where I'm from. But so now we are part of St. Anne's. Did in fact that financially help St. Anne's? Looking at the finances, I don't see that yet.
Well, yeah, we don't know yet.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, I don't know.
Yeah. So a lot of this. So that's why I think even the finance council we were talking about, like, that's why you also in the Old Testament they would have what they call these jubilee years. Right. So every 50 years or so, maybe 100, depending on where you were, what was going on, there would be a forgiveness of all debt, right? And everyone kind of level sets, right? And the Catholic Church has also upheld that tradition in the past too. Right. So that's why we're kind of hoping that when it comes to the debt that that's being part of the new combined parish, will that be kind of rectified? Hopefully. But I think in the same way that it's kind of looked at as, well, you have these combined funds that ideally, if everyone were coming into that same area. So in other words, if all the people over in foreign presentation were now part of St. Anne, we really wouldn't have a problem because the assumption that everyone's going to be contributing, right? And so that combined funds would outweigh any debt or any other expenses we would have. The problem is we don't have everyone coming over to the parish. So
that's just because of I think the geography of how the territory was split.
That could be, right. So we could definitely talk about the prudence of particular decisions when it came to all things.
Right.
But I think when we're talking about like what the church envisions as far as like how funds are used. Yeah. I mean, but I think if we're talking about the way the church envisions how funds, the funds are always used for the good of the parish, right? Mm-hmm. And so the idea is that you're helping the people in your community, that the parish is the community, and that those contributions not only affect the parish at large to keep the lights on, to keep the water running, to keep the priest and means that can be reasonable, but also for the charitable acts of people that need it in the parish.
Right, but like and again, I'm just gonna take presentation, or let's take any parish that
I
that
can
was
go back
subsumed, but that was
to Holy
financially
Trinity.
sound.
So I'm saying it again now.
So it comes back to money. I'm like, a parish that maybe was subsumed, but was financially sound, had no
Yeah.
reason really to be subsumed.
Well, so when we're talking about the reasons, that was a kind of a new direction. So in other words, when All Things New started, and I think we talked about this before too in some of those sessions, but when All Things New started, the intention was, oh, we don't have a priest. We need to just come together so we can actually use our priests well, to utilize them to the best of our abilities, and serve the people of the diocese in a way that's efficient, which is not a bad reason. After these things got started, Rome, I think it was the CDF, I could be wrong, but maybe it was the Office of Clergy. There was new canon law that came down that said, well, this has happened a lot now, especially in the United States and in the West. Maybe we should have some guidelines, because priest shortage should not be a reason that a community falls, subsumes, or fails, or changes hands or whatever. So the criteria that was handed down was threefold. So it can't just be priest shortage; it has to be two of these three issues. Priest shortage is one of them, but the other one needs to be either finances, which maybe actually a lot of our parishes didn't meet that criteria. The other aspect would be sacramental work. So in other words, if you haven't had a baptism in 10, 5, whatever years, well, that doesn't seem like you're actually, have a sacramental life going. You may have mass every day, great, and maybe the numbers are diminishing every day, every week, or something too. And maybe when it comes to sacramental application, when was the last time you heard First Communion, or a wedding, or how many funerals are you have compared to baptism? That was kind of looked at too, and said, some of these places are not actually.
Again, that becomes based on the area in which a parish exists. So if you have an aging parish, of course you're going to have.
Well, I'll give you an example. My home parish, Immaculate Heart of Mary. Financially, they were sound, but they haven't had a baptism since my niece, which was 5 years ago.
But they had funerals.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is you're having.
I know, but
40 funerals a year compared to one baptism.
I mean, isn't it?
It's a mess.
It's a mess.
It's a mess.
It's not a sacrament.
No, well, I mean, if the Eucharist is given, it could be a sacrament, right? But we're having Mass every Sunday too. That's a sacrament. So it's not just money. I think that's what we have to really look at when it comes to these things. The decision was made not just because of the money aspect. That was a factor, but the other factor that I think gets forgotten, and I see that in my home parish, was the sacramental aspect. So if you're having 40, 50 funerals a year, and you're having one baptism every 5 years, that doesn't seem like it really is a vibrant parish, right? And so I have a lot of sympathy, just because, I look at the home parish of Immaculate Heart of Mary, and I had my first reconciliation, my first communion, my confirmation was there, I had my first mass there. But also looking at it makes sense.
Objectively.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to do that as well, but I think that there are all kinds of aspects of a church, and baptisms are one of us, and them an important one, but there are other things as well. I mean, the people that parish have a sacramental life, and because there's not baptisms as many here.
I'm not saying just baptisms, but you look at we keep these sacramental records for a reason, right? Because we can go back and look and say, okay, well, we have this many baptisms, but how many confirmations? Maybe people move in the area, we're confirming kids. Okay, well, how many weddings are we having? Well, okay, and how many funerals? We're having a lot of funerals. Okay, well, okay, but also too, if there's also, what do the numbers look like? I mean, for the area, is it really are the numbers going down? Are they going up? Are they, is there a trend? All that, my understanding, all that was looked at, and I'll tell you this, but I did evaluation of one particular planning area, because I was asked to do so, and I shouldn't have, but it was a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. But yeah, you look at those things like, oh well, that seems like a factor.
I went to most of those meetings, and this is the first I'm hearing of that.
That's unfortunate, because here's the other thing too, Kathy. This came down, and then it was sort of, with everything going on. I don't know all the details internally how that happened, but we found out about this stuff actually after the first models came out. this really didn't like hit like we as priests didn't actually realize this until like the second round of models were going to be coming out. And when the second round of models came out, I was like, oh, we have to go reevaluate this because we have these new edicts that came out, and even though they've been out for a while now, we didn't know about them, and so we have to reevaluate, right?
Mhm.
So I imagine you probably didn't, because I know the only reason I knew this because I lived with canon law here when I was at King Gabriel, and it was like, oh, well, yeah, all right, well, I mean, it started getting out to the priests rather slowly. There's probably a lot of priests probably didn't even know, and depending on how much you wanted to know or not know, I mean,
It seemed like the priest should have been such a huge part of that
Well,
process to me.
well,
Yes.
in ways, yes, and in ways, I think that the question is, how much do the priests did they participate or not participate?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But how fair is that to the parishioners? I mean,
I'm not disagreeing with
this
you.
parish had the
I'm
priest is
just-
participating, and this parish had the priest is like, you know what,
Yeah,
I'm retired.
and you know, and that's the thing, and I understand that, but also too that you can't say the priest didn't have an opportunity.
Right.
And you can't even say the parishioners didn't have an
I would
opportunity.
just say
You know,
I was
yeah.
a key leader,
yeah.
and I have huge disappointment in what happened there, and I'm suffering, and you know that.
Yeah.
But I'm also trying to make sense of it, and I mean
Yeah.
a lot of what you're saying here makes sense to me, except for I saw things happen that didn't seem right. For instance, and I think you might know, St. Anne's was never even in our territory
It
until
Yeah.
all of a sudden
Yeah.
at
It
the end,
wasn't.
it was
Oh,
almost like, oh well,
no.
we're gonna make this work.
And here's the thing. I mean,
You know,
that
we
that
we
wasn't
didn't discern.
That
Yeah.
hurt,
Your
right?
territory.
that wasn't just you guys. That happened across the board.
And then explain,
Yeah.
if you know a little bit, like some of these parishes that appealed to Rome, and like very few of them, but are
Well,
winning.
there's more
I
and
mean,
more
based
winning.
based on what? Why is Rome saying, okay, no, you can stay open, because obviously the archdiocese applied the same criteria to all of us. So what made them all of a sudden like you can?
So I mean, I think what and I don't know for sure because the inner workings of the Rota, who knows, right?
Yeah.
But I think what they're looking at in those aspects is, okay, primarily was the criteria maintained. Now, the only reason that something will be overturned if you do evidence say, well, you know, maybe this really wasn't the case, right? So in other words, let's say, I mean, we can go, let's back up Heart of Mary, for instance. Let's take my home parish because, you know, probably nobody's listening, that's fine. But if, you know, I think the main reason that they were assumed was because of the sacramental aspect, right? So, and objectively, you're looking at this like, okay. But if someone came in and was like, wait a minute, no, you know, actually, you know, I was doing 14 baptisms in my house, and I just didn't get around to actually send to the church to actually get recorded. Well, that is a factor. Now,
Yeah.
shame on you. I mean,
Right,
you
they
shouldn't.
shouldn't have
Yeah, right.
been. Right.
But okay, it sounds like you have a little more years. There's other things going on here that maybe not been part of what was submitted to actually discern. Now, that would to me be the only reason to overturn it. As my canon law professor once said, who is a former associate at this great parish, one thing he did say that the apostolic nunciatura, which is the kind of the Supreme Court of the church, right? Our former Archbishop Cardinal Burke was the head of it at some point, right? Is that sometimes what the Rota looks at as their position as, and I say Rota interchangeably, it's the same thing. It's just the court in Rome. They kind of look at themselves as a check and balance. So a great example of that actually is one of the reasons why I'm a parochial administrator, not a pastor, right? So this actually happened with the predecessor of Archbishop Zansky, Archbishop Carlson, who ordained me. When he was the bishop in Minnesota, he took a very rather young, well, maybe not so young, but like fresh out of seminary, and put him in a position as a pastor in a parish that was very vibrant and growing. And this pastor started running things into the ground, right? You know, started spending things he probably shouldn't have, was making decisions that was kind of contrary to the good of the parish, blah, blah. It was like kind of a cautionary tale, right? Hopefully I don't do that. Maybe I am, but whatever, still. So anyway, Archbishop Carlson, then Bishop Carlson said, okay, we're going to have to move you. And this pastor said, well, you can't. He's like, what do you mean? It's like, well, local canon law, meaning the law of the in the United States that was handed down by the Council of Bishops, dictates once you named a pastor, it's because pastor is a canonical term, right? That's an actual law term. you cannot be removed within 6 years without agreeing to it. And I don't agree.
Oh.
So he took that all the way to Rome. And the way Rome looked, now, to tell you the truth, I mean, technically the priest was right. Now, you could question the prudence of, well, okay, what's my next time going to be in 6 years? I mean, that was maybe not a best decision.
But doesn't he take
But the Rhoda,
obedience?
was saying, like, no, they sided with the young priest because they looked at it as this is abuse of power, right? It's a check and balance.
Mhm.
So this
What
priestess
about
had the right
obedience?
also. Well, sometimes canon lawyers don't look at the actual
Okay,
letter, the intent. They look more at the letter,
Okay.
right?
Right.
And so I think what they're looking at here was just, we need to have a check because, okay, it's not fair that this bishop gets to dictate. And technically the priest did have the law on his side. But
that's why we have
in the
administrators.
next 4 years, even though the parish suffered, what was that guy's next assignment?
Right.
Because who makes that call?
Right.
Right.
The bishop.
So I think the role of the Rhoda in these situations are kind of looking at, okay, not necessarily was the process followed? Is there evidence to show that maybe the process was skewed? But also, well, you know, is this kind of an overreach, right? And not knowing all the details of all these cases, I don't know,
Right.
right?
Just curious how,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So what is
Will we ever know? Do you
what
think?
is Saint Anne
Well,
look like?
here, so that's kind of the thing about it, though, is that when it comes to these things, that was what's so interesting about the process of appeal is that, and that, I mean, it was funny because it almost kind of happened here. There was a lot of there was concern because the archdiocese kind of asked them to go through them to send to Rome on these appeals, right? But you didn't have to, right? If a parishioner at presentation, just out of the blue said, I'm going to write to Rome and ask for an appeal. Well, the only person who would know that would be Rome and this person, right? And so if we're going along assuming, oh, no one actually did anything, it's like, we're okay, we're all in the clear, right? Cool. And then we start subsuming things and bringing things together, and all of a sudden, oh, wait, hold on, there's an appeal out there. Well, you have to stop everything, right?
Right.
So it came close. There apparently was a parishioner here that did write an appeal to the archbishop, but never requested an appeal to Rome. And so it was dropped.
Right. I don't think,
Yeah.
I can say a lot about that. I mean, we had lots of appeals to the archbishop in presentation.
Yeah.
We all got the same form letter back.
Right.
That was a little hurtful.
Right.
Um,
Right. Well, that's the thing.
As
Like,
well as nobody said, this is how you go about appealing to Rome. We had no idea. So
that's the thing. I mean, I think I don't know what communication came out. I mean, I know that when I was at here's the thing. At St. Gabriel and Raphael, I was. There was no grounds for it.
There was a what?
There was no grounds for appeal.
Okay.
Because the parish wasn't being subsumed. It was just sharing a priest.
Right.
And
And again, what made that distinction? Like, you all get to share, but you're going to be gone.
Again, it came down to those criteria they were handed down. Like, is there financial problems? Is there sacramental issues? Is there, is a pre-shortage? Well, pre-shortage, but those other two aren't there.
Well, and
Okay.
a difference between being subsumed and forming a new parish.
Sure.
Well, okay, so really, this is really kind of a distinction without a difference. So, like, here it's here. If we would say like, since we're bringing together this community, if we want to actually come up with like a new name, or if we want to kind of make a distinction in the parish to kind of show that we're something new, we could do that. Any parish can actually do that.
But some of them were said, like St. Norbert, Angela Merisi, and Holy Name of Jesus, were said, you're going to form a new parish, not that one was being subsumed into another.
Well,
So,
see, again,
okay.
that's more distinction without a difference.
Okay.
So in other words, we could have done the same thing here.
Oh,
Right.
see, to me, it's a difference.
Yeah, and I think the difference would be, yeah, and in that way, I think they're kind of used interchangeably, right? So the reason they were, I think the reason they were up there with maybe they put it that way was because there was an appeal still out, Angela Merisi. So, in other words, the question from
Well, that
from
came before. The order came before the appeals
Right,
were out.
right.
So
I don't. In reality, part of that depends on the boundary. So maybe the distinction, and I don't know all the details, but like for instance, let's say you were going to split up a parish at the boundary of a parish and combine those with other parishes. okay, by definition now you have a new parish because the boundary has changed.
That's
Well, this-
exactly what they did.
Right.
This boundary changed too.
But it's still the original boundary of the former parish.
They didn't
So in other
split-
words, we
they
didn't
split us.
Yeah,
in
we didn't
half.
like take part of All Souls and say, okay, we're going to incorporate this into us, and now that makes us a new parish because the boundary lines, the original boundary lines have changed, right?
Doesn't
one of
St.
the-
Anne's boundary now include
No,
presentation boundary?
but it's still the same boundary.
But see, one of
Presentation's
the
boundary
Right.
didn't change.
So okay, let's maybe put it this
You
way:
lost me.
if we would say, let's say we were going to, they were going to take St. Augustine, right, and they're going to cut St. Augustine in half and give half St. Augustine to St. Anne, and the other half, let's say, Mother John the Baptist.
that's what they did with Holy Name.
That's a
that
new
was in our
parish.
model for Holy
Gotcha.
Name.
Right, that would be a new parish because well, the original parish now is a different boundary.
It's gone, right?
Yeah, so now we have
Literally.
yeah, right.
Okay.
So that would be a new parish, but in reality, like you look at St. Joseph and Bakita, right, what Father Doyen did there, right? Any parish can actually do that. If we wanted to say, like, instead of St. Anne, we want to call ourselves Our Lady of Grace or something, right?
Okay.
That would require a lot of work and a lot of, okay, let's get everyone on board and see what they want to do. But any parish can do that even now, right? I mean, the good example of that would be Blessed Teresa of Calcutta. Why is that not Saint Teresa of Calcutta?
Yeah.
Right? So because the parishioners there decided, well, we're going to keep it blessed now. That to me, that's insane. Sorry, BTC. I mean, I don't, but she's a saint now, right? She's no longer blessed. So
Change the name.
right,
Had too much stationary order.
yeah, that right, something like that, whatever it is. So yeah, I think again, it's not. There is a slight distinction, but it's also like not.
Not really
Yeah.
too much
Right.
different.
So based on the criteria you just said, how soluble is St. Anne? I don't see that many baptisms. We didn't have that many confirmations.
Well, we still had. Well, yeah, but I mean,
Right.
we still have one every two. Like, so in other words, we've had a schedule of different things, and so far, even here since I've been here, I've already had what 8 baptisms.
Again, everything is dependent on something
Just-
else, and that's
Yeah.
because you all have a school, so you have
Yeah,
families here
no, right.
who are having
Yeah,
children
no,
and they're going to
exactly.
get baptized.
Exactly. Right.
Take away your
Yeah.
school, that's
Yeah.
not going
You're
to
not
happen
wrong.
here.
So, I mean, and that's the thing
I
too.
know.
I mean, that's part of this. I
I'm
don't
just,
know.
you
Yeah.
know what, Father, I have not had an opportunity to get it off my chest, so I thought
yeah.
this is the place.
Great.
Father,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
appreciate y'all putting up with my
No,
nonsense.
sure.
No,
No, it's not nonsense because I think
No.
a lot of people have these questions and
I think I need to get
Yeah.
off my chest in order to move on.
good.
Yeah.
No, that's good. Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Okay.
great.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's
we do
interesting
want
stuff.
you to come here.
Oh, and I do come here, and I'm on the finance committee, and I give my money here.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I still love my parish,
Sure.
my church. I'm
Yeah.
gonna say
Yeah.
maybe I don't have a parish anymore. That's how
No,
I
you do.
feel.
This
I
is-
feel like I don't. Though.
Yeah,
And I think that's what
And
the
I
Archbishop
understand what
needed
you
to
said.
look at.
yeah.
That
Mhm.
that the older people, and then we need something too.
Mhm.
It's
Right.
great. I care about the kids. I'm all about Catholic schools, even though some people think that they're not important.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm a product of Catholic school, and I'm still here,
Yeah,
right?
right. You
But I
survived.
also think, as we grow older, I think you have a different kind of need for your church and
Yeah.
and I don't think that was looked at. I think it was discounted for baptisms, and
Yeah, I mean that could be a fair assessment also too. I mean,
Yeah.
The whole thing didn't make sense.
And I'm sure somebody's told you this already. There's a whole bunch of people out there who are afraid if they register, it's going to close again. St. William's closed. Holy Trinity
it's
closed.
gonna what? Oh,
Presentation
Yeah.
closed.
right. You keep.
Is that
I
because-
haven't moved.
I wonder if
St.
that-
Mary's was the runway.
Yeah.
So
Was that because they think that they're jinxed, or is that just kind of like this is more like a waste of time because it might just wait till the very very end?
Yeah.
Yeah.
kind of
Well,
all of it.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I think a lot of this comes down to okay, because I think here's what I thought was very interesting when I first got here. You look at the demographics, and to tell you the truth, like this area actually is growing. Like people are moving into it, but they're just not.
I think
Catholic.
you're seeing,
Yeah,
well,
You know,
not Catholic.
And so I think, like in the same way, I look at the school as kind of a great seed bed, ready for reaping, right? of some evangelization going on, right? I think that's where we need to start. Because I think here's the thing: if we're following what Jesus wants us to do well, right? This wouldn't have to happen anymore because wait, we're bringing people in. We're getting RCA people, we're getting kids baptized, and we're getting this happening and going out there and actually living our faith in a way that's attractive.
And I was just going to say that it seems that there should have been other ways other than just closing churches to make evangelization possible. It seems like that should have been looked at first, and if that did not work, then close the churches. I feel like we did it backwards, because not only did we close churches, but some Catholics were like, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm not even going to church.
Yep.
So, so you know what I mean? It's like, why not? Why didn't we try?
I guess
we need to reach the youth.
Yeah,
obviously.
I guess the way that was looked at, and again, hindsight's always 20/20, I think, in some ways. But like, when you're looking at these things, I think part of this is you are looking at like demographic shifts. You're looking for potentiality of demographics changing in the future. But I think also, I mean, honestly, the main reason this was really all started is because we don't have vocations, or I should say, it's not that we don't have vocations. We don't have ordinations. We're not getting people to follow this life for whatever reason. And
but I tell you what, Father, and this is the truth.
Yeah.
I went to Our Lady of the Presentation, grade school. I went to Narings Hall, high school. Do you know that never was I talked to about joining the religious life ever?
And I understand that because because I never was either.
So that's where we're lacking.
So I guess here's the thing, though. I mean, I guess in the same way, has anyone at this table asked any young people they know if they thought about them? Well, okay, yeah,
sure. No, it's
hard.
hard.
For you to say. She works in the vocation office.
Oh, okay. There you go. Okay.
So I think, I mean, I know one thing I try to do is every time I with the servers, I at least plant the seed. Have you ever thought about it, right? Because I think that's really something to do, and I think the more that people do that, and not just say it just in willy-nilly. I think part of that is being like, I like there's certain kids here at this school that when they're assigned to go to mass, even if they're not assigned to go to serve mass, they show up. And to me, there's something about there's something there.
That's great.
Right?
Yeah, they're feeling something.
Yeah. So I think part of that's being attentive to those things. Yeah, and I'm not going to say that we've done a great job of catechesis and really kind of fostering those vocations from parishes or even from high schools for that matter. I will tell you, going to CUC, of course, there weren't priests, but the brothers, I think every year you'd have someone called Brother So and So. The next year they were Mr. So and So. Now they didn't take final vows, but to my knowledge, I don't know anyone in my graduating class that was ever asked if they thought about becoming a brother. Now, they may have done it in subtle ways. I do recall there was one time where me and a buddy were asked to go over to the brother's residence and bring something up to the rooftop bar, because they had a rooftop bar over there at the old CDC. And I think that was a chance like, hey, this is how we live. Check this out. Isn't this kind of cool? But never was actually asked, like, have you ever thought about this? Right. So.
Yeah, I mean, as me growing up in the 60s, it was kind of like, us Catholics, we don't shove it down your throat. That we let other people preach fire and brimstone, but we have our faith. I think just is the way we were brought up.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't think that's necessarily a wrong approach, but I think I've often said in many occasions, I don't think evangelization starts with, hey, let's talk about Jesus. It starts with, how are your kids doing?
Right.
How's your family? How's your mom?
By the way you live your life.
Yeah, it's relational, right? Because I think eventually when it's not a short-term game, it's a long-term game. And so I think if you're living your faith life authentically, your interactions with people, eventually someone's going to ask the question, I wonder why that person is doing this. I wonder why this person is living this way. I wonder why this person is exuding this kind of joy. And at some point they would ask you, right? Hey, I noticed you do this, and why? Well, that's an opportunity. I might do this because I'm a follower of Jesus.
Speaking of opportunity, who was the young man this morning serving?
Oh, yeah, we have two seminarians. living with us.
Oh, well,
so,
that's good to
so
know.
over the summer we have well, it was not sorry, it was announced at Mass on Monday. So we went there. It's not, but
I like early mass. I like early mass.
it'll be in the bulletin this weekend too. I put it in my column. So Ben Easterbrock and Patrick Clausen.
And so who?
That was Ben this
Ben
morning. Yeah,
this morning.
yeah. They're both juniors in the college, and they're working in the vocation office this summer.
And they're staying.
They're staying at the rectory presentation.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good. Great.
And we actually have a Ugandan priest moving into the rectory here in July, so we're kind of seeing what happens there.
So, I was going to say, going back to what you said about like sharing the money, I feel like this is my opinion. A good plan would be sister parishes, like a parish that has a lot of money, sistering or brothering or whatever you want to call it, up with another parish who doesn't. So yeah, when you've got a parish who has an exuberant amount of money and they don't know what to do with it, it can be shared with the less fortunate.
And I agree. I think those were the kinds of opportunities that should have been looked at that weren't before they did this crazy all things new.
Yeah, and I think part of that, that's the other thing too. This is some of these things. A lot of these things aren't necessarily. How should I say? They could be passed down from the archdiocese, but I think they look at it as better just to be done by the pastors, right? So in other words, as a pastor, I kind of have a lot of autonomy in a parish, right? Parochial administrator is kind of the same job. There's not like the title, and there's still kind of like a level of like, well, don't do anything you can't get out of it. Kind of stuff like that.
When do you get your title?
A year.
I don't know. Not the archbishop.
Maybe because you have to like prove yourself, or what's the deal?
Well, again, it comes out of that same thing about when I talked to the archbishop.
Okay.
So the fruit of that was every time he's had a new pastor, and the Archbishop Zansky kind of continued this practice. He makes him parochial administrator instead of a pastor first, especially for their first pastor.
You're earning it.
Yeah, well, so what that means is I can be pulled in a moment, right? And so, okay, that's why I was in the second grade class today. Like, are you going to be here next year? I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, well, are you going to be here? I'm like, oh. And I was thinking, I was like, oh,
God willing.
Yeah. I was like, oh, you're asking if I'm going to be reassigned. Because, they've had 3 pastors in the last year, right? Right. And I was like, oh, well,
Well, Father Nick,
Father
Gray.
Nick, Father Gray, and then me.
Father Gray.
Well, Father Gray was never installed. It was an assignment.
Well, he was
that
assigned,
never
but
came.
he was still assigned. And so,
never
he,
came.
yeah, right. But he did, but he didn't. so
he accepted it.
Yeah.
So he was technically named a pastor.
Right. So he's never installed, but he was assigned.
He got sick.
And so, so there was like, are you going to be here? I'm like, well, I imagine I will be. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, I was like, I can't make a guarantee, right? I can't say for sure because it's not up to me. Then we actually talked about in the class, like, who makes these calls? Who is where?
It's good that they know that.
Yeah, right.
They learn that.
Yeah.
So it was it was heartwarming, but it's also like kind of sad. I'm like, I don't know. I hope I am, but we'll see, right? Who knows? Yeah. So yeah. I mean, when it comes to these things, the pastor does have like a lot of autonomy decisions. Like, a lot of people were talking about St. Monica and what was going on over there, and I think I don't know all the details, but to me, if you should know if the school's going to be closing probably by at least November of the year before the end of school.
Right.
And the reason you should know that is because not only do you have a good idea what the finances are, how many kids you're going to have probably coming back next year, teachers, all that good stuff, but also just so you can give your teachers and your students an opportunity to actually go somewhere else. Right.
It was not. It's
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing as all things. Well, it is all things new, but I mean, it's kind of like that. We're gonna pull this. This is what it feels like. I'm not going to say this is what it is. It feels like if we do this at the last minute, you don't have time to react. This is happening.
Maybe I
And
mean
that's really sad.
one thing that Archbishop Carlson always used to say is like always to tell pastors like if all else fails, just blame the archdiocese.
Right, but that's
Because they have big
you know what,
shoulders.
Father? I'm going to use this word. That's shitty.
Well, but to a point, though, Lisa, I think what people don't realize is, and maybe I'm revealing a little bit too much here, and my brother priest might gang up on me a little bit, but the pastor has the autonomy to make those decisions.
Right.
When it comes to the school closing or opening, that's on the pastor. That's that's a call.
I mean, I
you
think
know?
schools are so important.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I pray that that's the reason
Yeah, I
St.
agree.
Anne's State is
Yeah.
because we have kids at state
I
care.
think there were a lot of factors. I think primarily looking at that, I think it was the size of the church. I think it was the fact that the school's here, and also I think UMSL ministry had a big part of it too.
I totally do.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
on the other hand, and again, I'm not archdiocese bashing, but it's been kind of hurtful. Like I look at, and I'm being a key leader, I was kind of looking at the other territories, like Immaculata and Annunciata. Okay, give me a break.
I know.
Give me a break.
I know.
You're talking money,
Yeah,
money.
I know.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what does not the Archbishop think that we're smart enough to see that, and does not he realize
Well, that may have been
that
why. That may have been also
that's
why.
a people loser?
That also be why he was looking at this. That's probably also why they're except for Immaculata. Immaculata was sort of an anomaly.
It's not an anomaly, Father. It's, you know, I went to the meetings. They were the biggest ACA
Yeah.
bringer-inners,
Yeah.
and so was an
Well, what I mean is like if you look at the other standalone parishes in the archdiocese that weren't sharing priests or weren't subsumed, all that stuff. Immaculata was the only one that kind of stood out. It's like that doesn't make any sense.
No.
You know.
Everything west they didn't touch.
Well, but if you look at those, like, some of those parishes, like, okay, you're looking at like Holy Infant, and you're looking at like places like, I don't know, Annunciation, and I'm sorry, Ascension, and Carnward. These places out west that are all standalone. It's like, okay, yeah, they're big. You know, they have over 1,000 people, 1,000 families. They have schools. They have these things. So like, okay, that does make sense that they would be alone. But also too, like then you look at like things like Annunciata, but they're a pastorate. So the thought was, well, maybe that's sort of a good common ground, that you're not a standalone, but you're also going to have to share priests. Now, what's funny I think about that is Annunciata apparently appealed, even though there was no grounds to appeal. You can't appeal because you're not being affected. You're still keeping your funds. You're still doing your parish. So it was sort of a moot point. But yes, I think that is a fair critique. I think that's when the priests were kind of talking about it too. Is like, well, man, I hope they kind of just don't follow the money, right? Because
it felt like that to some of us.
And again, I think a lot of these things were handcuffed because of what came down from Rome. Right. And I think that was kind of because I think you look at those initial models that came out the very first time. I think there was a lot more intention to start merging a lot more parishes. They were going to go for like 180 down to like what
75
right, exactly whatever it is, right? And so I think most people are like, oh, it makes sense. And then all of a sudden, oh, well, hold on. There's a lot of our parishes that don't meet this criteria. So now.
And one of the things she touched on, which I think makes a lot of sense, like for instance, let's talk about All Souls, which is a highly Hispanic. Okay, well, we were being told at the beginning of All Things New that, hey, we're not the ethnic parishes that we were in the 50s and the 60s. That has to stop. I'm confused, Father. So, you know, and I had suggested, you know, sister parishes, okay, if you let presentation and also maybe we really, truly can bridge that gap.
Yeah.
Do things together, work together.
Yeah. I mean, and you could look at that and say.
And now they're out there doing their own thing, ethnically separated from everybody.
I mean, hindsight is 20/20. I mean, I don't know.
It shouldn't have been hindsight.
Well, no. But at least what I'm trying to, again, I'm not trying to defend you here. I'm trying to look at this as devil's advocate and say, like, well, maybe they're looking at these different things. I really don't know.
We know you didn't make the decision.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, we don't mean
to
be like
no,
attacking
We're not hammering you. I am just trying to get some level of understanding and wishfully thinking that, gosh, there's something more than what I'm seeing, because it doesn't all seem real clear and
there
real
may be.
fair.
I mean, I'll tell you too, like, and also kind of disadvantage I have is coming in here kind of after the fact, right? I mean, so I was never really involved with like not only the plans, but even the plans afterwards, right? So I could tell you I was looking at, because I kind of knew where I was going to be back in May. Well, I was originally supposed to just stay where I was.
Where you were.
And so my approach was like, okay, what's going to happen here? Okay, well, you got these parishes, so there was a lot of work to kind of engage and say, okay, let's, we're going to be sharing things. Let's look at these mass schedules and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, 2 months after All Things New was kind of brought in, it was like, oh, hey, you're going to go here now. Oh, okay. Right. So in some ways, it was kind of.
But you didn't know that till what, September?
Late September.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm trying to say. It's like, I tell you the truth, I didn't even know what was going on up here. because by the time, I mean, I was kind of looking at things and seeing things, okay, I was kind of keeping track
I
of
feel
this
like
thing.
this stepchild.
But once you found out where you're going, it's like, oh, okay,
Right.
now I can actually focus on what's going on
Right.
and where I'm going to be.
And I will say, I truly believe that God sent you to the situation because, I mean, it was rough because like our pastor retired before the parish even closed, and then we had Father Gray who was there and he wasn't there, and then he was sick, and then I mean, it was like, what is going on? And so it was almost like you were like this breath of fresh air coming into your thing.
And I have
there's
to say,
something to grab onto here.
I have to say, it's funny how often like people are telling me like you're being tried. A lot of people tell me you're being tried by fire. I'm like, am I? Well, here's the nice thing about that. I have nothing to compare it to, so I don't know. Right. I mean, I look at some of my brothers around here. Like, I don't know. Well, I know there's some recent coming outs like Father John Schneier, who's going to be going to take over Father Wester at All Saints in St. Peter's.
Yeah, he announced that.
Yeah, and I mean, from my understanding, All Saints is a very vibrant parish. I don't know what their school looks like. I don't know, internally what's going on there. But Father John Schneier is the best, and I think the struggle there is you have a pastor who's been there for so long, and so part of that is just really kind of not only just understanding the culture, but also developing a vision, which I've been trying to do the last few months, to try and develop a vision going into the future, what the parish looks like. Then I look at someone like a good friend of mine, Father Scheider, who is trying to bring together 4 parishes in the city, and he's still waiting for an appeal to happen. And so at least I'm gonna have the benefit that we've already kind of started that process. That process already kind of started before I got here.
Right.
So I think it always can be worse.
And it
progresses.
That's right.
The weeds are on the other side.
That's right. That's right. As much as I've experienced here, which has been beneficial, and even things that haven't been beneficial, I appreciate the experience, and
I mean, you couldn't be a pastor under really any better learning
term
than you are.
I tell
here.
you, it's a good place to be.
Everything is happening.
Yeah, that's the thing about it. I don't really know if I have anything to complain about or anything at all to really discuss because it really hasn't been that bad here.
But you have also the experience
because we're good older Christians.
Right.
Well, no, but you have experience of being in the workforce before being ordained. Yeah. So you have that expertise.
I mean, in some ways, it's kind of funny how things don't change between like the corporate world and like in your diocese. But I think also too, it's like I was never actually in management when I was working. I was more of a technical expert, which is great. But I do learn though from I was very fortunate to have some very good supervisors. And I remember vividly this one time. That's why I've been kind of also, I don't want to change a lot because I've been very much aware of the situation. When I was at Boeing, I was down in Charleston, and at that time I wasn't actually working. I was down there supporting Charleston from Seattle. So I was stationed, my home base was Seattle, but I was down in Charleston for like 4 years before I actually transferred down there fully. And I transferred down there because they made me a lead, which, okay, fine. But when I was there, they had a new director of engineering that came down from Boeing to the plant. And I was tasked as being the senior engineer, which was kind of funny. I was only like 30, to take this guy around and show him the plant and kind of show what we do and all that kind of stuff. And, he made a comment at times like, well, why don't, at the time we had a separate office for the engineers. So we could, because the strength there is we could actually bounce ideas off each other and kind of use that expertise in order to grow and find solutions. So it was very beneficial, especially for those of us on a new program trying to learn this stuff. Well, he had the idea, which was tried before, of taking one from each like group. So you have like a quality person and a manufacturing manager and an engineer and manufacturing engineer. And you can put them together and they can go look at things like as a committee and then come with a solution and it'd be very efficient. Well, they tried that like a couple